Star Renegades is one of those games that comes really close to being one of my all-time favorites of this year, with some beautiful aesthetics and art, as well as a very engaging combat system. But as we're going to talk about, some of the kind of late game designs definitely lead us more into frustration than fun. But to start off, our story is that an evil multiversal threat known as the Imperium is trying to take over. And our mission is to lead essentially the resistance in different parallel dimensions to try and take things back. This is done over a 4-area campaign where you have 3 planets and the main kind of enemy fleet. Now please keep in mind that the developers have already announced post-release content and updates, so this video may not represent the current version of the game if you're watching it later on. The structure involves each planet being procedurally generated around these various areas. Each in-game day, you're able to enter 3 areas, and the areas themselves can have enemies, events, items, you get it. After the 3 charges are up, the team will then camp, and you'll be able to choose kind of how people interact with each other. That will unlock additional benefits and bonuses further down the line, as well as passive buffs for the following day. And this becomes more important as you get further into the game. Essentially, each planet scales up the difficulty. You'll get an additional party member. You'll have a total of 5, plus a special one for the final area. And you'll start to have more complicated elements in terms of front line, back line, things like that. So you will be needing these buffs in order to stand a chance. With that said, let's get back to the combat system and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Combat is very reminiscent of kind of the Timeline Management JRPG titles. I believe it was Grandia or Suikoden. I'm sure some of the vets will be able to comment on that down below. In order to survive, as you see on the top of the screen with a timeline, the rules are, whenever an enemy or whenever somebody attacks, if you can get an attack off before their position on the timeline, your specific attack will automatically crit. And crits in the game will always add more damage or additional status effects to said attack. Now your party is made up of individual characters who each represent a unique class. So the lady here, she is our tank, while we have a sniper robot, a scoundrel, and I forget the 4th character at the moment. But each character will level up by using DNA, which is earned by completing battles. And this unlocks new skills, new campfire interactions, as well as changing their stats. So the challenge of combat is basically figuring out, how do I deal with my enemies while mitigating as much of their actions as possible? And this is very important, and this is what will probably throw off a lot of new players if you're not used to this system. Now, you can't do things indefinitely, and that's kind of the big point about the combat. That every time you stop an enemy from attacking, you can kind of see on the timer there's a number next to their individual icon. What that means is if you stagger them too many times, they will become unstaggerable. So you will have to take that hit in order to reset their kind of resistance to it. Now, your team members can get special abilities. The Fury that you see at kind of like above the status bar in the bottom left is used for special actions, whether there are team-up moves or each character's own individual super move. For instance, the Scoundrel gets a stun ability, our tank can recover her shields, and again, it grows based on each character. When you're fighting, every character will have shields, health, and armor. Armor will always block a flat percentage of health-related damage. And this is, again, another big point that occurs later in the game when you start fighting bosses and other enemies who have a lot of armor to wear down. Now, As you've been watching this fight, this is with kind of one of the more common enemy groups, but the game does make use of an elite system, similar to Shadow of War and XCOM War of the Chosen. At the start of each planet, the game will generate these elites, and the elites themselves have, essentially they're built around various passives, so they may resist a certain attack type, they may go rabid or aggressive if you hit them with something else, they could be weak, and the game does hint that if you die to them, they'll become promoted and stronger on a following playthrough. Now, killing the elites is very important because this is the main way you're going to get additional loot. The loot system in Star Renegades is a little weird in that each gear piece will most likely provide passive benefits. It's a lot harder to get pure damage, and you'll really have to kind of try and capitalize on your classes and try to focus on their specific builds. So for instance, our tank here, whenever anything attacks her while she's defending, she will do reflect damage. So armor or item, or kind of like the accessories that can boost that would be great for her. While other characters could get weapons that could improve how quickly they attack, which is really big for our slow sniper. And again, the sky is the limit, and you unlock additional weapon types and variants using the game's persistent elements. After you win or lose in the campaign, you'll be able to take accumulated intel and another resource back to kind of the main hub. And this is where you'll unlock additional classes, the weapons, as well as a few passive benefits. And I'm sure the developers are working more on this, especially considering that this is the development team behind Halcyon 6 that received a ton of upgrades post-release that completely changed how the game worked. And I'm hoping that we do see more work done with this game because I love the combat system. The layer is just that crunchy enough to make combat feel interesting, but not bog things down too much, and it does reward mastering the mechanics and your teammates. With that said, Star Renegades does have some issues when it comes to overall balance, especially in the back half of the game, and we're going to talk about that next. But first, a quick break. And now for a quick shout out to our current Game Wisdom supporters and sponsors. Going forward, all Patreon supporters will get early access to our videos. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, linked down below. If you're looking for more wisdom about game design, be sure to check out my latest offering of books, 20 Essential Games to Study, aimed for first-time developers and students looking for some inspiration for their upcoming games, and Game Design Deep Dive Platformers if you're interested in anything regarding 2D and 3D platforming design. They're both available in print, digital, and wherever books are being sold. Star Renegade's kind of difficulty spikes don't really occur on the first and maybe second planet of the campaign, but it really starts to make itself known on planets 3 and 4, which unfortunately I don't have too much footage of that. But as you're watching this boss fight here, one of the big issues the game has is that you're very limited in terms of defensive or kind of damage mitigating actions. The tank is such an important character because of her ability to take damage away from your squishier enemies or your squishier units. And this becomes very big when you start running into groups of enemies who can do a lot of damage to individual targets. If you start a fight against a 5 enemy team and they all target the same character for like 100 to 150 points of damage apiece, that character will most likely die before they can even do anything. And again, this is where the damage mitigation helps, but like we said, you can't mitigate it all. Now, one benefit with Star Renegades is that there is no permadeath during battles, i.e., If your entire party falls except for one character, but you still win, they will revive when you go back to the main map. The only time that you officially lose is with a complete party wipe. But this can still be very frustrating to have a party that works really well in the beginning, to then run to an enemy group that just says, nope, time to kill all your characters in one turn. And it does very much focus or force specific team compositions. I can't imagine high-level play of this game not revolving around a tank or somebody to provide damage mitigation. Now, while the elite fights are loosely random, the boss encounters are fixed at the moment. And again, when you have fixed encounters in a game, especially one that is very tactically minded, it forces you to make certain party choices. So, the footage that you're seeing, this is from, I think, my third run of the game, and by this point, I know what to expect, and that means I know how to build a party. But the problem with that is that it removes some of the variants of what could go into a very interesting and engaging combat system. And I would like to see kind of more differing tactics if developers choose to continue to, again, balance and add more stuff. On their roadmap, they are planning on adding in more character classes, which at this point in time, I don't know what they're going to do in terms of changing how the game is played. And I read a few people who played this who found the game to be very demanding. And once you start running to enemies with a lot of armor or a lot of defenses or health to get around, it does bog things down. Now, one other complaint that I think is very important to mention while you're watching this footage has to do with the UI itself. The UI is dynamic. As you can see, whenever I make choices or actions, it updates the timeline at the top accordingly, and that's great. But it doesn't go quite far enough in terms of kind of giving me the information I need. For instance, if I have characters who can buff or support other characters, the timeline or kind of the updates don't necessarily work. And I think part of it is that if, let's say, I want to do a buff to a character and then see what it does on the timeline, if the buff occurs at 0 seconds, meaning that it will occur immediately, I can't do that buff, see the results, and then cancel or rewind. Also, enemies who do status affecting or damage over time related debuffs, it's hard to see where those show up unless you are constantly inspecting the characters, and I feel like having that information be dynamic on the status results or the results outcome would help to mitigate that. And it's little things like that that will end up screwing you, like it did when I lost the entire campaign due to not getting the information that I needed. And again, these issues could be fixed with updates and quality of life patches, but I can't comment on that at this moment in time. To wrap things up, Star Renegades is an impressive game. I don't feel like the roguelike elements or the persistent elements work as well as they should, but the combat and tactical layer are just so great that it does help to overcome some of these issues. And if the developers can fix them and add more content in the months to come, this could be a very standout game to enjoy. With that said, thanks so much for watching this video. If you're new, as always, check out our Discord and Patreon, link down below. And if you are a developer working on a game that you'd like me to take a look at in a future piece, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Once again, this has been Star Renegades, and until next time, take care. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, And tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.